Welcome back to another episode of What's What. Today, we're going to cover a topical subject, and that is how electrical advancement can help work towards global decarbonation initiatives. But the move towards zero emission will not happen overnight. We must stay diligent, continue to adapt, to learn, overcome many obstacles, and do our part to reduce emissions. Sorry, I got excited there. Before we start, do not forget to like and subscribe below. The International Energy Agency, or IEA, is an intergovernmental organization that provides data, analysis, and policy counsel for the energy domain. Their member countries represent 75% of the global energy demand, making IEA a key player in helping conduct their battles to achieve zero emissions. Let's take a look into their operations and find out what they hope to achieve. The IEA has presented a normative framework called the Net Zero Emission by 2050 scenario, which maps out a path for the energy sector on a global scale to achieve zero CO2 emission by the given date. But this framework will rely on the capability and cooperation of all countries involved to achieve net zero emissions worldwide. Even with collaboration for an effective energy transition to be ensured, necessary resources must be secured at all times, thus minimizing volatility in the marketplace. The integration of available technology will also be dictated by cost, maturity, and individual country circumstance. But before we get too far into the future, how about we examine our current situation to see where we start? As of the filming of this episode, only 5% of the cars in the world are electric. It has also been instated that no new coal plants are to be approved for development. And solar and wind account for 10% of total electricity generation. Domestic change in usage, aka sobriety, has become increasingly popular with the public, and that's a great thing. But larger-scale industries accounting for 70% of total emissions will require massive deployments of new equipment and infrastructure. To achieve the goal of the net zero emission scenario, fossil fuel usage must be reduced by 60%, from 80 to 20% in less than 30 years. And most of these emissions result from energy use in manufacturing industries, transport and building. So we understand our biggest challenge, but what can we do? The answer is moving to technologies that do not operate on fossil fuels. In addition to major hydro plants and nuclear electrification, the use of solar and wind generation are identified as the most efficient solutions among growing technologies. And right now, there are some daring technologies being explored. One new disruptive scientific method involving electrification is the principle of CCU, that is carbon capture and utilization. Here, carbon dioxide is recycled for valuable usage, like creating plastics. CO2 is combined to hydrogen to get gas or methanol. The synthetic e-fuel then supplies conventional combustion engines. But the amount of electricity required for the transformation is very high. Another innovative technology suggests moving large-scale battery storage to a more versatile hydrogen method, especially when the weight of batteries dubs down aircrafts, trucks and boats. With this approach, electrolyzers split molecules of water into oxygen and hydrogen. Hydrogen can then be stored into tanks and returned to fuel cells, and devices convert the chemical energy of the hydrogen and an oxidizing agent back into electricity. Once again, decarbonized electricity is the core of a virtuous and sometimes self-sustaining process. IEA identifies bioenergy as a decarbonation standout. Biomass is an organic supply of energy that includes plants, microalgae, bacterial or fungal organisms. Energy can be extracted from them by direct combustion or by combustion after a transformation process of the raw material, methane from plant fermentation. This process is a great way to recycle waste from forests or farms. Disruptive applications can bring us surprising technical niches. Recently, a Japanese startup, PowerX, has built a prototype for a fleet of vessels to transport low-carbon electricity stored in battery containers to population living in islands whose surrounding waters have high seismic activity, which makes poor conditions for submarine cables. But although we trust science and progress, we must be careful not to fall into techno-solutionism. Sadly, technologies alone will not solve the consequences of 2 centuries of human activity. It is important we remember that global change will not be cured solely by breakthrough discoveries. We use electricity to heat, to cook, to light, for mechanical action, for chemical transformation, and to control domestic and industrial appliances. If we combine a mix of mature and disruptive technologies to our usage, that might do the trick. We'll be one step closer to achieving sustainable electrification. But energy supply from coal has been stagnant over the last decade, despite the rapid growth in renewable energy. And our world still relies heavily on fossil fuels for energy, including new gas infrastructure to compensate renewable energies when not available. With that being said, many benchmarks have been set: new processes, electric vehicles, data centers, renovation. And so now all that is left is the hardest part: implementation. The use of more electricity will require more infrastructure, and transmission and distribution grids must evolve accordingly. But this shift is strongly dependent on public favor. Nothing will be possible without significant investment, acceptance, and innovation. According to the results shared by the IEA, the effort by its member governments and companies is simply not enough to get us on track to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. For us to continue developing more advanced technologies, generation units, grid and storage infrastructure will rely on the availability of raw material and electrical equipment. So, the supply chain, as it evolves, must be managed with attention and detail through each step of project implementation. And because raw material resources are becoming scarce, recycling will be a key element to sustainability. Aside from the reduction of greenhouse gases, electrification has other benefits. It offers innovation, incentive, competition, and the integration of progressive technology, thus having a positive impact on productivity, business, and the worldwide economy. Not only that, but 800 million people still have no access to electricity, and electrification can provide better conditions and health services to the global population. Here is a quick recap to wrap things up. Electrification will help us reach decarbonation in the future. The International Energy Agency has created the net zero emissions scenario to provide an outline of what can be done to achieve zero emissions by 2050. For this scenario to become a reality, it requires backing from the participating countries and their citizens. There are disruptive energy solutions being explored, but more concrete answers must be put in place. Among growing technologies, wind and solar energies are solid alternatives to fossil energy. Growth, it's a beautiful thing. What keeps us going? Only if sustainable. And to continue, we must understand electricity. That way, we can work toward a brighter tomorrow. Do you have any thoughts on the way to get closer to climate neutrality? Feel free to comment below. We can't wait to show you what is in store for future episodes. Until then, au revoir!